Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So last week we talked a little bit about business writing, and this week we're going to really get down to it. So in deciding how to prepare to lecture for you this week, I decided what we need to do is go through the textbook like I attempted to do last week. Last week, though, I had you follow along in your own textbook. This week, I'm going to make sure that we have it up on the screen. At least I'm going to try. But if not, you can follow along in the textbook. I'll make sure to give page references too. So let me share my screen and we'll get going. All right. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So when you begin to write, the first thing you need to do is come up with your ideas, of course, and then perform your research. So you want to collect all your ideas. I recommend brainstorming, just getting out a piece of paper and thinking about your topic and then writing down everything that comes to mind. So you have lots of options. And sometimes you can even combine those options into one really good idea. So that's always my recommendation. I like to do mine on index cards, write all my different ideas on different index cards, and then see, that way I can kind of shuffle amongst them and figure out what I really want to focus on. So when you're ready to write, however, the first thing you must do is organize. A big mistake that people make when they start writing is to just sit down and do it. Now, if you're writing an email, that's one thing. I'm not suggesting that you draw up an outline for your email asking someone to go have lunch with you today, right? But when we're talking about a document, you need to organize yourself. Now, if you're going to write an email and you have to be very careful about the way in which you write it or about the words you use, if it's an email that you really need to spend a lot of time crafting, then you might decide that you need to do at least a little bit of organization. At the bare minimum, I always encourage folks to write the purpose down so that as you're composing, you can look back at that and realize if you've gotten off track or if you've gone too far or if you need to reiterate the purpose. All right, so when we talk about organization, we talked a little bit about ethos, logos, and pathos before, but we need to talk for a moment about the general purpose and a thesis statement, right? Everything has a central idea. Everything has a general purpose. You're writing something for a reason. You need to know what that is, like I just said. If you're writing a formal piece and you need a thesis, then these next couple minutes are for you. So a thesis statement, and you might remember these from some tragic high school teacher who just on and on and on and on about the thesis statement. I was that tragic high school teacher. A thesis statement is essential. When I was teaching high school, if the thesis statement was weak, I would automatically give the student an 80 and it would just go down from there. I was like, rough, you guys. But don't worry, I've softened over the years. But the thesis statement is essential because that's the point. So your thesis statement should be, and it's listed here, a declarative statement. That just means you're declaring something, you're stating. It should never be a question. A question is not a thesis statement. Oh, hold on one second. I believe my child is ringing the doorbell. Jack, stay inside, please. Okay. He's 5. So it should be a declarative statement. A thesis is not, a question is not a thesis. Please hear me say this. A thesis is not a question. The answer might be the thesis. Question is not. Never has been, never will be. It's called a statement for a reason. It should be a complete sentence. It should use specific words, not something general, like The Scarlet Letter is the best novel ever written in the English language. I mean, we could discuss that on the side, but a thesis statement would be The Scarlet Letter is the best novel ever written in the English language because of its literary craft and also its examination of the complexity of the human heart, okay? Specific. There should be a single idea, so The Scarlet Letter is the best book ever, and reflect consideration of the audience. And so often I suggest that when you're writing a thesis, you really focus on the effect, but it really depends on what you're writing. All right. In terms of organizing principles, I don't think I need to go through all of these because they're pretty straightforward, but it's different ways of going about organizing your document. And what you choose will depend on what's most effective for your document. So you may choose to organize by time, especially if you are giving a report. Someone wants a report on the status of this project, then you may go chronologically. Comparison, especially if you're doing an analysis. Contrast, cause and effect. So a lot of these you'll see in reports that you'd be asked to write. The problem and the solution, and that would be often seen in a proposal, a business proposal of some kind. Classification, biographical. This is going to show up in many places, but it's certainly going to show up in your cover letter. Space, so the parts of something and how they make a whole. Ascending and descending, so quantity, quality, right? And then psychological, which is intriguing. So that's a complicated one, but kind of fun to attempt. And so that really gets into the desires of the audience and the fulfillment. It's useful for persuasion, but takes a lot of practice to craft. Although, like I said, I think it's fun. Elimination, example, which is used quite often. Process and procedure, especially if you go into any kind of technical writing and you're writing a training manual, for example. Point pattern, definition, testimonial, these are kind of straightforward. Ceremonial, I always call those speeches to inspire or pieces to inspire. So those are the different ways you may go about your overall structure. So what we're doing here is we're starting with your general purpose. And then, all right, that's my general purpose. How do I want to structure this to make sure that the general purpose shines through from beginning to end? I'm going to start with my thesis and then what? Okay, and that's when you choose if there's a particular organizational pattern you want to use. And then once you've made that decision, you make the outline. The outline is the part most people skip, or they do a really skimpy job on it. The outline is essential. Before you put all the work in, it goes ahead and shows you if you're really developing your point, or if you need to go back in and switcheroo some things or add in some more segments. It's like a preview of what you're about to write before you've ever sat down and put all that work in. The worst is when I would have a student turn in an essay fully written, and I would literally take the essay and cut it with scissors, the paper, and then rearrange it for them and tape it together and hand it back. I sound like a monster. If they had written an outline, we could have looked at that and I could have said, no, you really need to switch these around, and explained why that would have helped the development. Yeah. So outlines are important. Now there's a variety of types of outlines. Some people like really detailed ones. I like a really detailed outline for myself when I'm writing. I like to have, when I'm doing research, what I do is I use index cards because I love them, color-coded ones. And I put my notes, one note on each index card, one something interesting, one piece of research. And then I put a little letter and a number in the corner, A1, A2, or from a different source, B1, B2. And then I make my outline with, very similar to this first example, with the main idea, the subpoint, and the specific information. And then I would put the code from my particular research card, A1, A2, I would put it in here as well, so I knew where that was going to be. So I like a really detailed outline just for myself, but you need to do what works best for you. So yours might be more like the second example here, right? You have your thesis statement, and I suggest always writing that out, or writing out the general purpose fully in sentence form, so you can really look at that while you're writing and also go back and make sure it's very strongly stated. and then, you know, the points that you're going to make in the body of your piece, and then your conclusion. Now, I got to say something here, because summarize your main points, that's a no on a conclusion. I want you to forget that this was in the book. Your conclusion draws everything together. Here's how I teach conclusions, okay? The introduction just introduces the topic. Introductions can be short in most cases. Sometimes if you need to provide a lot of background or context, depending on what you're writing, it'll be longer. If you're writing a business proposal, for example, you might have a long introduction with a history and context of that's led to your proposal. The conclusion should be the answer to this question. So what? So what? I wrote this whole proposal. So what? What was the point? Right? It's not just the thesis at that moment. It's not just the general purpose. It's bigger than that. It's the general purpose. It is a summary in some ways, but it's more of a synthesis, tying it all together. So if I were writing a report on, let's see, I'm working on a project right now at a firm called Workday. If I were writing a report on where we are right now and how it's gone so far in our project, my general purpose would be to show the areas of strength and weakness in the project. And then my conclusion might be my final evaluation. In my opinion, the project's going very well. We've had these areas of weakness, but we have addressed them and will continue to address them based on the points that I've made in this report, okay? So the conclusion, rarely you'll want to just summarize the main points. If it's a really long piece that you've had to write, then sure, summarize the main points. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure I just read those, so I don't need a reminder. But I need you to draw it all together and tell me, so what? What was the point of this whole thing? What do you want me to remember when I put this paper away? Because that's the last thing you're leaving me with, the conclusion. All right, paragraphs. Paragraph structure is important. And they're not that hard to structure if you just get the pieces in mind. Every single paragraph should start with a topic sentence. The topic sentence is basically the thesis of the paragraph, okay? That's the point. If I went through what you've written and I read the thesis and all the topic sentences in the conclusion, I'd know exactly what you had communicated in that piece, that essay, whatever it is. I'm going to call it an essay, just out of habit, all right? I wouldn't have all the support. That doesn't mean necessarily that I believe you, okay? Because I need to read all that in the paragraphs, but I would know all the points that you made in that paper, every single one, because they should all be present in the topic sentences. So when you sit down to write a paragraph, and I do this with my outline, I'll write the topic sentence, all the topic sentences for the paragraphs on the outline. The topic sentence is just like the thesis. Once you write the rest of that paragraph, you should read that paragraph through and then go back, and that topic sentence should tell you exactly what you were proving in that paragraph or exactly what you were focusing on, right? Topic sentence is essential. It shows that you planned and you organized and you really thought this through. It makes that one little tidbit can really elevate the level of your writing and the esteem that your writing is given by others. Body sentences support the topic sentence. That's where you have your examples and you discuss those, right? That's where you would have your research if you were incorporating it in there. So basically, it's sort of like the proof to prove the topic sentence or to support the topic sentence. Conclusion sentences, I can honestly live without. Some people like them. In certain scenarios, they can be useful. If you're writing something using a cause and effect organization, then it makes sense to have a concluding sentence. Or if you're writing something procedural, it might make sense to have a concluding sentence. Otherwise, unless you're writing these long drawn out paragraphs, when you're done, just stop and go on to the next sentence. Now you should include transitions, and those can be as simple as transition words. And those will be part of your topic sentences. Okay, effective sentences. I don't think we need to go through this too much. It just talks about the different types of sentences. I will say a couple things about simple sentences because I mentioned this yesterday when we were talking about style and how I would rather see a bunch of simple sentences that are clear than have this murky piece of writing where you were trying so hard to use compound, complex sentences. But you should, if you are someone who writes in simple sentences, and that is fine, you should begin experimenting with incorporating these different types of sentences. And you can do that in the daily activities and the writing that you do, okay? The daily or weekly activities that I have you do, I'm going to look at your grammar and usage, but for me, those are more about the content and response and all of that. It's a holistic way I'm going to grade them. So don't be afraid to try out these sentences. I'll know that's what you're doing. I'll know you're trying out the complex sentence or the compound complex sentence, okay? And that'll make me happy. Okay, so a simple sentence just has the subject and predicate. The compound sentence is basically two complete sentences combined with a conjunction or a semicolon, which is my favorite piece of punctuation. A complex sentence, sales have increased and we have the sales staff to thank for it. And then compound complex has, although the economy has been in recession, it has this, oh my gosh, the clause, there's a word for it. It doesn't actually matter. I'd rather you be able to use it than name it. We're not going to diagram any sentences in here, although I think that's fun. Although the economy has been in recession, which is not a sentence on its own, right? It's a phrase that's leading into this main statement, okay? Let's see, moving on. Be specific, don't be vague. Be clear. Avoid sentence fragments. Sentence fragments are where you don't have a subject and a predicate, or you've just got this awkward phrase. Although air transportation is fast. Okay, that's not a sentence. That's a phrase like, I need more. I'm left needing more. Costs more than trucking. And here's the difficult part. We talk like this. We talk in sentence fragments. I say this all the time. Not costs more than trucking, but things like that. It's not a sentence though, right? What costs more than trucking? We don't know. There's no subject in that sentence, y'all, right? Although air transportation is fast, it costs more than trucking, right? So there we've made a complete sentence. We now know what it is. It's air transportation, right? So be careful with your sentence fragments. Also be careful with comma splices. That's where you just start throwing commas all over the place and not where they're technically supposed to be used. I can do a whole lecture on commas, but that would seriously be like an hour of your lives that you would be so angry with me and you would want to have them back. So I will not do that, but I suggest you look up a little bit more about commas. We'll probably discuss them at some point. Okay, so also here is it's a handy little chart that has different ways of saying the same thing. So you might consider, switching up some of the phrases that you use. Also, repetition you can use, but you don't want to be redundant, right? You don't want to say the same thing again and again. You want to be clear. Repetition should only be used with the main, really important parts or words. Okay, transitions I mentioned before, but here are some examples of transitions that you can employ in your writing. And moving on, I gotta pick up the pace, man. You guys are gonna get bored of me. Okay, here we are in here, writing style. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, formal versus informal. Most of the business writing you do is formal. But depending on the atmosphere of your workplace, then some of your minor communications, emails, for example, would be informally written, and that's okay too. Err on the side of formality until you realize it's okay to do it otherwise. That's a better choice than walking in there all informal and having to pull it together. Okay, so err on the side of formality. Okay. We talked about emphasis. I told you my story. Okay, I do have to say one thing here about active versus passive voice, and this is in section 6.2. They've labeled these incorrectly. I was reading this and I was so confused. I thought I had completely forgotten what passive and active voice are. Oh wait, no. Yes, they've switched some of this down here, okay? So B is preferable. B is active voice. But here they've switched the letters down here. In sentence B, the subject is Mackenzie. The subject is the doer of the action, right? That's active voice, okay? So the subject, Mackenzie, is the one processing, okay? Sentence A here is the one that's written in passive voice, okay? And that's where the subject receives the action. All sales orders are processed daily by Mackenzie, right? So passive means that the subject basically receives action instead of doing it. So you should use active voice, which is where the subject of the sentence does the action. Active voice sentences are generally shorter, so they're more concise, they're clear, precise. So you want to go for active voice. So one more time, because it's twisted around inside the paragraph. A is passive voice because Mackenzie's the one doing the processing. He's way down here, right? He's like an afterthought. B is active voice because Mackenzie, who's doing the processing, is front and center. It's very clear that he's the one doing the processing. He's doing the action of the sentence. I find this a little tricky. Okay, commonly confused words. Work on these, work on these, work on these, work on these. These commonly misused words are pet peeves of many, many people in the business world. And the more mistakes of this kind you make, you're not doing yourself any good, okay? So really look at these. Accept or accept. Accept means besides. Accept means to take. Affect and effect. Ooh, this is the tricky one, isn't it? I'm only going to go through a couple of these, all right? Effect is a noun. It's a thing, okay? Affect is a verb or a verbal, okay? So this is how one of my friends told me to remember this. The effect of the wine affected my walking. The effect of the wine affected my walking. I think of that every time I'm trying to decide which one of these words to use. It's apostrophe, right? This is possessive, so that's its water bowl. This is it is. Remember that an apostrophe indicates a contraction. Lay or lie, so you lay down an object, a person lies down. We, in everyday life, we do not use these words correctly, right? Lay is for an object, lie is for a person. Principal and principal, okay? I remember this because the principal is your pal. I mean, sometimes, okay? And the principal is the principle of the matter. But that's how I remember this one with pal and principal. That's how I remember that it's a person. Let's see, irregardless is not a word, so don't use it. I know, I've probably just blown your mind, okay? Than or then, than is a comparison, then tells sort of what's coming next, okay? Let's see, there, and there, once again, contraction, they are. There, EIR, possessive, there's a place. Two or two. Two's a preposition, where you're going. To is also, and the number 2. And then this one, who, whom, whose, or whose. Oh my goodness, guys, isn't this crazy? Okay, who is the subject of a sentence? Okay, So that means that's the person doing the action. Okay, so who is picking up the kids from school today? The answer is who, fill in the blank with a name. Or that's the man who mows his lawn at midnight, because he's the one mowing the lawn. Whom is an object of a preposition, but an object. Now, it doesn't mean it's not a person. It's an object in a sentence. So, to whom should we address the thank you note? For whom are you buying that present? Okay, it's not the subject of the sentence because you're the one buying the present. You're the one addressing the thank you note. Who are you buying it for? Whom? Who are you, can't remember my other example was, addressing the envelope to? Whom, okay? So if it's a subject of the sentence, it's who. If it's an object, if it's receiving the action, it's whom. And then your. This absolutely drives me bonkers, okay? Your is possessive. It's your office. Your with an apostrophe, that's a contraction, my friends. You are. This is so bad that when I get flowers and it says like, it's signed, the person's written from your aunt, for example, and they use the wrong one, it just like infuriates me and I will not showcase the card. I know, I have issues. Okay, moving on, making an argument. Okie dokie. We talked a little bit about arguments yesterday and persuading, but I want to go through the classical rhetorical strategy with you because it's important that you know these things. This is an Aristotelian creation. So in the classical rhetorical strategy, you prepare the audience to consider your argument, which is basically like an introduction, provide the audience with necessary background or context, also part of your introduction, and then introduces your claim, which is your thesis, right? The confirmation is the body of your argument. The refutation, this part's important. If you're trying to persuade someone, whether it's in an email, a report, or a proposal, you've made an error if you have not addressed one of the counterpoints, right? Or the counter argument. If I'm trying to convince everyone that Britney Spears was the pop princess of the early 2000s, and she was, my argument will be weaker if I don't discuss Christina Aguilera. Now, I can discuss it in several ways. I can concede. I do concede that Christina Aguilera has the stronger voice. However, Britney was a stronger dancer and performer. Okay, conceded. Or I can refute. Christina Aguilera cannot be considered a pop princess of the 2000s because although her first album was in fact a pop album, after that she really started going more into the hip hop or R&B genre. Okay, but you will make a mistake when you're trying to persuade someone if you don't at some point address a counter argument or another way of looking at it. Doing so shows that you've done your homework, you've researched, you've thought about it, and it beats them to the chase, right? And then you've got your conclusion. Okay, so there's a couple different ways that you can outline, and I'm gonna have you create an outline actually for your assignment. Here, let's see, let's find it. So an outline for an argumentative persuasive essay on the topic of your choice. You can use classical argument, which is what we just went over, or the Toulmin method. I'll talk about forbidden topics in just a minute, right? The Toulmin method, it looks shorter, but you would repeat this several times. So this is sort of like a classic essay for you to outline, okay? Your introduction, thesis, the body of it, a refutation, and then conclusion. Toulmin is similar. You would have an introduction, you would have a claim, right? And then you have your supporting reasons and the connection between the claim and the supporting reasons, right? The nice thing about this is that it really draws the connections for your reader in showing how the data supports the claim. If you choose this one to do an outline, you'll need more than 3 paragraphs, right? You're going to have several examples of data and warrants. Okay, and then you have these argument strategies. You can read these because you are very capable humans. Make sure that you use evidence. When you're making arguments, appeals to emotion can be really helpful. We discussed that the other day with In the Arms of the Angel. Okay. Fallacies are examples of false logic. So no, I would never say don't use them. You can use them. Just know that when you're using them, about 50% of your audience is going to fall for it, and 50% is going to be like the fallacy. I call people on their fallacies all the time. I'm so obnoxious, right? That's a bandwagon argument. That's fallacious reasoning. Yeah, none of you are going to invite me to your parties. It's okay, right? But you can use these as well, and people use them all the time. A fun thing to do if you want a game to play tonight is to make a little bingo card with all these fallacies on it and then watch the news. Or I would pick a news channel, not like News Channel 4, evening news, because they're pretty right to the point. Turn on the news channel of your choice and play away. And when you say bingo, see how long it took you, right? But you can go through these and look. There's great examples over here to help. These are all pretty clear. The ones I see the most often are ad hominem arguments. And then also, oh my goodness, the slippery slope, which is not listed on here as slippery slope, but sort of similar. It's not really similar to circular argument. The slippery slope is, well, gosh, if we do that, then soon we'll all be doing this, right? Well, gosh, if we let our daughter go to the movies with her friend, the next thing we know, she's going to be drunk at a party down the street at so-and-so's house. That's a slippery slope. No, that's not necessarily the outcome you're going to have. Okay, and then to always be ethical in persuasion, right? Persuasion it's about persuading, and it can be kind of manipulative, but you don't want to deceive, you don't want to distort, you don't want to evoke an emotional appeal that doesn't have any basis, right? So you want to be fair when you're making these persuasive arguments and ethical. Okay. Paraphrase and summary versus plagiarism. We can go through this really quickly. When you paraphrase, you take someone's idea and you reword it. Okay, you just paraphrase it. You have to cite that because that's not your idea. When you write a summary of what someone said in your research, you have to cite that because those weren't your ideas. When you quote verbatim, you got to cite that. Those were not your words. Anything that's not your idea, whether it's your words or not, cite it. Otherwise, you've plagiarized. Okay, the next part I'm going to go through pretty quickly, revising. Once you've written out your project, you want to go through and revise. Here are some points you want to consider. First of all, the content. Let's make sure, first of all, that you responded to the assignment. Whatever assignment you've been given, make sure that's what you did. I am the biggest one for going off on a tangent and finding myself way down the path picking flowers. My mom always tells a story about how when she was coaching my elementary school softball team and how I would stand in the outfield and pick daisies and make daisy chains. And that's true. Because at that age, no one hit the ball that far. So, I mean, I made flowers. My athletic career didn't last very long. So make sure that you stay to your purpose and make sure that the content supports your purpose, it's all relevant, and it's well developed. Evaluate your organization. Seriously, I have, for my own papers, printed them out, cut the paragraphs up, and then reorganize them, right? Read through, and if what you've written is not clearly going from one point to the next to make a bigger point, cut it up and scooch it around a lot. My in-laws are texting. Evaluate the style, right? Are you using formal tone? Is that what you're supposed to do? If you're working on something collaborative, then you want to make sure there's a standard style. So it should be consistent in style. So one person needs to go through at the end and just make sure it looks as if one person wrote it, even if all 4 of your names are on there. Readability, okay, so clarity. Go through, make sure that it's clear, it's concise. You've taken out any jargon or defined your words, stuff like that. Okay, a little more specific format. I appreciate a 12-point Times New Roman. It's just standard. I appreciate a left alignment, a 1-inch margin, but make sure you know what the expectations are, and if there aren't any, then just go standard. I like things double-spaced. To me, that's standard, right? Unless you hear otherwise, double-space it. But make sure if you're given formatting rules that you follow them, because that's the first thing that's going to turn people off to what you've said. Okay, facts. Have you done fact checking? Did you look to see if someone's claiming the opposite is true? If you have not, you got a little more research to do. Fact check your own work. Names. Oh my heavens, you must spell people's names correctly. Oh. In the olden days, when I was scary teacher, if you misspell the main character's name in your English essay for me, gave you a D. Automatic, not even a question. Because to me, it's just the epitome of lazy. All you had to do was this. Oh, look, it's my book. Oh, it starts with D. D, okay? If you're including the names of people who are going to be reading this document and you misspell their names, ooh, buddy, not good, not good. If you're writing cover letters to different organizations and you don't change the name on the cover letter, bad news. My husband was recently looking to fill a position and someone sent a letter to the organization addressed to someone who doesn't work there. They did not get an interview, okay? Spelling matters. It shows attention to detail and it shows respect. Okay, spelling in general. If you have trouble with spelling, it's okay, man. Use spell check, but go through and make sure that your spelling is the best that it can be. I know that for many people, spelling does not come easily. I got it, I know. But this is also why you're gonna have someone else give you some feedback. Hang on to that. Punctuation marks, make sure you use them correctly. If you're gonna use a colon, make sure you know how. If you're gonna use an ellipsis, make sure you use 3 dots, not 5. It's not just random dots, it's 3, y'all. Here's a whole section on commas. The biggest one to use is to always make sure you use a comma before a conjunction, like and or. If you've got two bits that could be complete sentences on their own, comma, comma and, or comma but. But you can read through these examples of commas. And actually, I really love commas, so if you have any questions, just let me know. Semicolons combine 2 individual independent clauses. So if both sides could be, if you have 2 full sentences and you want to join them, semicolon, or comma and. Okay, apostrophes, we know this makes things plural. Notice that when the letter, or when the word ends with an S, you just put an apostrophe at the end. Okay, grammar, subject-verb agreement, right? Make sure that the sentence makes sense. Verb tenses, split infinitives, double negatives. You want to avoid all these things, but you can read these for yourselves. It's not, you know, need me to go through and give you flashbacks of middle school grammar class. Okay, in terms of style revisions, if you have really long sentences, you might want to break those up, okay? Likewise, if you have really short ones, try to combine some. If you use really big words that you don't need to use, it's not impressing me. It looks like you're trying too hard. It's okay to use a simpler word, but if the bigger word is the best word, then use it. Long phrases. Just try to work on taking words out of your work and making things more concise. Archaic expressions. Oh, fillers. Oh, you don't need fillers. When you're talking, like, and you keep pausing, like, okay, those are fillers. Don't just put a bunch of mumbo jumbo into your piece because you think it needs to be longer. No one's impressed by fillers. Take the slang out. Really consider if you need that cliche. Precise words. Parallel construction means using similar grammar patterns when you're listing something. So like here, we found the seminar interesting, entertaining, and inspiring. That's correct. We found the seminar interesting, entertaining, and it inspired us is not, because that's not parallel. It's not the same in each part of the list. Okay, they should be structured the same way. Obscured verbs, okay, is a professional. My suggestion to you, and I'm good with this because I think it's an important skill to learn how to evaluate other folks' work. Now, I am not saying someone else should proofread it for you. You should proofread, okay? You have to learn how to do this. You should edit your paper. This is what I'm okay with. I'm okay with you writing your piece, editing it, and then after you've done the initial editing, hand it off to a friend or someone in class. Right? You can use the forum to try to find somebody if you need that, and have them read it too. A second set of eyes is usually helpful because when you're writing, you know what you're trying to say. You get it and you believe it. That's why you're writing it. Someone else can say to you, yeah, this argument doesn't really make sense, or where did you get this information, or but why not this way? Okay? Other people can see the misspellings better than you can because you knew what the word was supposed to be. And sometimes when we write something, we read it back, we miss all the misspellings or even the wrong word because we knew what it was supposed to say. One of the most embarrassing moments for me as a writer was when my novel was being edited at the publisher, and he sent me all of his edits for me to accept. And there were two places where I used the wrong word. Like, I said someone was going to bear a child, and I used bear as in naked. I was an English teacher, y'all. That's embarrassing. Embarrassing. Get light. All right. But my point being, my suggestion to you when you're creating something big time, like, I don't know, your final exam, you create it, you edit it first. You've got to learn to edit. And the only way you can is by practicing. And then you trade with a friend, or, offer to read somebody else's or have someone else read yours. I mean, everybody should get a chance, and have them read it too. And just, take the advice. When you're editing someone's work, you want to make sure that you do all these things, but really, you don't want to make the corrections. You just want to point out where there need to be corrections. Because at the end of the day, if you're the friend or the classmate, your name's not on that paper. Someone else's is. But point out the places where there's an error, circle them, put a question mark, whatever it is, and let the writer correct it. I hope that makes sense. Okay, I think I'm about done. Proofreading, make sure you proofread. Think about how you've designed things, framing, typeface, all that jazz. Okay, so you're going to, for your activity this week, come on. Oh, look at the thing at the top keeps popping around. It's getting in my way. There we go. You're going to write an outline. You can choose either class Klarman or Toulmin method. I do have some forbidden topics, and there's a couple of reasons that they are forbidden. One is personal to me. I taught at a religiously affiliated school for a long time, and I'm really kind of burned out on listening to some of these particularly moral topics. That doesn't mean I don't have opinions about them. I certainly do. And it doesn't mean that I don't want to hear opinions that differ from mine. I'm actually super good with that. I love dialoguing. I've just read so many papers about it. And also because when it comes to these topics, people tend to start arguing more with their emotion than with reason and statistics and data and all of that. The third is because there are some topics that are almost impossible to persuade someone else to change their point of view on, and those are moral topics. Morals are so deeply entrenched. Morals are don't necessarily have to do with reason. They have to do with belief, and there's something more abstract to that. So it's really difficult to persuade someone to change their moral view on something. So for those reasons, these are my forbidden topics. And regarding that last point, choosing one of these topics wouldn't give you the best experience at really trying to evoke, pathos, but also ethos, and also logos. Like I want, pick something different, okay? Please do not choose abortion, the death penalty, abortion, the death penalty, marriage equality. Don't pick those, please. I've read a lot on those. Pick something that's not necessarily, okay, I'm gonna stop talking about it, okay? But you can pick a topic of your choice. I mean, we're not all being serious here, so I would definitely choose Britney Spears is the ultimate pop princess of the 2000s, but that's just me. Or U2 is the best rock band of all time. Or I like music. Something like that. So you can pick a topic you like. It should be persuasive. And that's your assignment for this week. So I'll put a question in the forum, and I'm going to unleash you now to go and work on your outlines. You don't have to write the whole thing. Although I will say this, if you write the outline and you decide you kind of want to write this just so I can evaluate something you've written before you turn in something for a grade, I'd be happy to read it. If that's the case, just shoot me an email and say, hey, I wrote the outline and I decided I'd just go ahead and write this thing. Can you give me just sort of a general evaluation of where you think my writing is and what I should really focus on going forward? That's optional. If you want to do it, great. If not, that's totally cool. We're all busy folks, and I won't think it's because you don't care. All right, so I'm going to let you go because this has taken way too long, and I'm sorry about that, but it's really important. These are the building blocks for everything that's going to come. I hope you guys are enjoying this and are learning a lot, and I'm really excited to see your outlines and what you want to argue about. You really can choose anything. It can be serious, it can be nuts, your pick. All right, I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful evening or day or whenever you're watching this, and I'll be back with more next time. Bye.